Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope you're doing well there. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great, and appreciate you stopping by. So, let me tell you something, dude. That Chop Robinson Instagram post, that was needed because it wasn't as if the day was bad enough with all the doom and gloom that came out of the joint practice from hell, which is, I mean, it felt like it should have been titled a WWE match, like the joint practice from hell, because, you know, like I was following along. I was live on the air while all these tweets were going on. So, you know, you're keeping the banter up on the show. We're following some of the guys. We're following the people who are boots on the ground, and, you know, whether from the Herald or, you know, Travis from the Dolphins or Feronis from the Suns, and whoever's out there, you know, boots on the ground, you know, Isaiah Smalls from the Herald and others who you're just like reading the tweets as they're going on. And like, I didn't feel like they were making it seem, you know, too bad a beat down. I think most of the angst seemed to go to Chop Robinson, and everybody's like, And then like a couple of people were like, yeah, it seemed like the arm, you know, arm, shoulder, don't know. He was going for a loose ball. He had just gotten swallowed up by Penei Sewell. Oh, Penei Sewell. Every time I see Penei Sewell, all I think about is my friend and former show producer, Robbie the Degenerate, who all he wanted was the Dolphins to draft Penei Sewell, and they drafted Jaylen Waddle. And he got on the draft show that night. We were doing one, and all he just is like, they didn't have the balls to take Penei Sewell. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget how he acted that night. And Penei Sewell is an absolute monster. He's an absolute monster. Look, Mario Cristobal has a lot of flaws as a head coach you could point to, not kneeling on the ball, clock management. I'll tell you one thing, though. That dude puts together a mean offensive line, and Penei Sewell is no different. He is certainly in that scope. They got Francis Maui Noah putting together too. Just everybody on that offensive line is just a titan and a behemoth. You know, it's really, really scary. So anyway, the practice ends, and all we're seeing, I'm seeing these like Barry Jackson retweets from all these Lions reporters, and they're just like, whoa, that was the most dominant joint practice I've ever seen in my life. That was the best the Lions have looked all summer, all training camp. Lions offense carving up the Dolphins. Dolphins couldn't get anything going on offense. So I guess the Lions are dialing up for a hell of a defensive season, it seems like, because they're like, they haven't seen the Lions offense look that good, and quite frankly, the defense just absolutely stifled the Miami Dolphins. Jack Jones apparently just got carved up by Amon-Ra St. Brown. Ooh, he's smiling. He's peacocking. I heard Channing Crowder on the way as I'm leaving the studio today. Channing Crowder was boots on the ground, and he's just like, well, those offensive line struggles and those secondary struggles for the Dolphins, concerns, he goes, those are real. Those are real. So, you know, all in all, it hasn't been a great day. It wasn't a great day. And then you finally got a little bit of relief that Chop Robinson comes out there and he goes, I'm okay. Not serious. I'm okay. I'm like, whew, thank God. Thank you. You know, Chop, you're one of the gleaming lights on this team in a season that right now feels like it's just got this cloud of darkness over it. And everybody's just waiting for the monsoon to just absolutely swallow up this season. Thankfully, Chop Robinson is there, and you got Jalen Phillips saying he's going to be a defensive player of the year. And if the Dolphins would have lost Chop Robinson, on top of everything, on top of Kohu, on top of who knows what's going to happen with Austin Jackson, on top of everything, you might have needed to open up the liquor cabinet if Chop Robinson wouldn't have been good to go. Now, as for the struggles today, look, Tua was upfront about it. He seemed pissed. He was on the media, and, you know, he called it a very frustrating day. He kept using that word, frustrating, that the execution wasn't good. It wasn't up to their standard. I think he handled it all like a real leader. And Jaylen Waddle, who got back in some action today, Mike McDaniel said that both him and Tyreek, they were out there, but they weren't full go back. So, you know, take that for what it is too. The Dolphins didn't have all their bullets in a joint practice. I also think there is part of me like, look, I want to be clear about this. Make no mistake. the Miami Dolphins, this era, this build, the McDaniel, Tua contingent is very much on thin ice, okay? I am not going to be surprised if this team were to get off to a bad start. That McDaniel's gone, Anthony Weaver finishes off the season. I never think Chris Greer's going to get fired. That guy's like the ultimate, he's just able to keep going. It's amazing. So I'll have to believe that. I'll have to believe that when I see that. But as far as this era, the greatest show on surf, the tide will be at an all-time low if the Dolphins get off to a 1-3 start. Don't lose week 1 to the Colts. You already lost to them last year. You're going to lose to them again? This Dolphins team that just, they can't beat anybody in the AFC South apparently. It's the worst division in football, or one of the worst divisions in football. It's a juggernaut against the Miami Dolphins. But either way, it's thin ice right now for the Dolphins, okay? I'm also trying to take all of this with the proper perspective of it is a joint practice. It's practice, okay? People keep talking about that Eagles practice from years ago where the Dolphins dominated and the Eagles ended up going to the Super Bowl. I was at that practice. I remember that. That was still when I was able to go to practices practically all the time during the week. And I remember I was sitting right in front of all the Philly media. I was sitting right in front of a bunch of Philadelphia reporters. And man, they were so unimpressed with Jalen Hurts and they were gaga over Tua Tagovailoa. And now the shoe's on the other foot, it's been an interesting, it is right now at a spot where we all talked about the Tua rankings and all that type of stuff. But we're getting so crazy about these joint practices, a little too crazy. Last week with the Bears stuff, the Bears are apparently playing very physical and that they maybe were playing dirty. They tried to punk the Dolphins a little bit. And we were like, people were losing their mind thinking the Dolphins had to come out in this preseason game and they needed everybody to play and they needed to send a message to the Bears. And I'm just thinking to myself, are you people insane? This Dolphins team needs to get their ass in gear, in shape, and healthy as possible. And by the way, that's been a hell of a task recently by week 1. There is nothing. You could get better, but there's nothing that's going to be. You can get better, you can improve, but there's nothing that is going to be won by winning these joint practices. And in fact, I think trying to want your team to win practices is a little pathetic. Because honestly, let's say the Dolphins went out there tomorrow and they have the greatest practice known to man. They really stick it to the Detroit Lions. Is one of you pessimistic pollies out there, one of you going to give them a lick of credit, or are you going to give them any sense of applause, or are you going to give them any sense, or are you going to have any sense of relief if the headlines come back tomorrow? Dolphins get their get right. They get their payback on the Lions. And I can answer it for you. Of course not. You want to know why? Because it is minute in the scope of where the Dolphins need to get to. Okay? They need to do so many bigger things to do right by the fan base and where they're at. And I understand why the fan base is where it is. Okay? It's very, very sensitive right now. Everybody's infighting with each other. Nobody feels good about the product. Some people feel duped. Some people feel ashamed to feel pride in their team. And that's not a place you should be. But you also got to keep this thing in its proper place. And we're just getting a little too nutty with our reactions to practices like they're motherfucking divisional games. They're not. This is not against the Bills on primetime. Okay? This is not any type of rivalry game. This is a practice. And I understand your retort. If they can't do it in August, then how are they going to do it this? Bleh. First of all, it's never been hotter. And the problem for the Dolphins has always been in the cold. Okay? It's like, and the other truth of it is, and this is what you may not want to hear, the Detroit Lions are one of probably the few favorites that can go and win the Super Bowl, especially in the NFC, where you don't have like the murderer's row of quarterbacks. And they're just at a better place than the Dolphins are right now. And that's just the facts. And what maybe is frustrating is a couple of years back, the Dolphins were handing them their lunch. And they were looking great, and they were looking like the team that had the step up on it. And, right now the Dolphins are swimming upstream, and the Lions are trying to tune themselves up for a monster run and not have the wheels fall off like they did last year and get back to a conference championship like they were a couple of years ago. So I guess I say all that to be like, look, the Dolphins having struggles on the offensive line when they don't have all their offensive line and they're going up against a potent Lions defense is not surprising. Amon-Ra St. Brown and that offense, which has been humming, carving up a pasted together secondary, especially on one-on-one drills, is not surprising. It's also not surprising to hear Tua is struggling without his top receivers, because guess what? When Tua doesn't have throw to his two top receivers, his numbers aren't as good. They haven't been. There's usually execution breakdowns left and right. So, yeah, it's not great to hear. I understand people being pissed off. I'm not jumping off a bridge over it. But I also, people were going crazy about the Bears game. And maybe I'm looking at this too optimistically. I came out of the Bears game feeling pretty decent about things. I was like, man, some of the young guys look pretty good. There looks like there's some talent in that wide receiver core. The defense looks like it's got some dudes. The line, yeah, some guys are up and down, but some guys held pretty rock steady. So we were going nutty about this with the Bears stuff, and then the game dictated something different. I don't know, again, if the Dolphins go and have an awesome day on Thursday and then come back Saturday and roll and look like a machine. Is anybody going to celebrate that? No, you'd sound like a lunatic. So also don't come at it with the same amount of like, I want to crawl under a desk because of how a joint practice went. It's just, I'm not at that point. I was way more scared and nervous about the Chop Robinson news than I was any kind of this guy won this guy won that. All right. Get the Dolphins. Do I think the Dolphins are better than the Lions right now? No, I don't. Does this mean that they can't use this for something? It absolutely does not. They can. But the biggest news out of everything today was not the results of a practice. Okay. It was the fact that your young, up and coming pass rush sensation is healthy, or not really hurt. Let me recant that. Not really hurt, according to him. That is much bigger news than whatever happened. Do I want the Dolphins to bounce back? Of course. You want to show those stones. You want to show fortitude. You want to show that you have some stomach. And I do think that the Dolphins rightfully are facing a lot of those questions, because every time those things have been questioned, for the most part, you guys probably can come to a couple of examples, but for the most part, this era of team, the Tua McDaniel build, with everybody they put around it, with their, their fancy outside runs and their tiny wide receivers who are awesome but slow down as the year goes on, for the most part, when you need them to show, do they got the stones? Do they got the cajones to go out there and show that they got it? They have come up short on either side of the football. So, yeah, it would be nice to see a great response. It was good to see Tua fired up about it and Jaylen Waddle fired up about it. I thought Jaylen Waddle said a fascinating thing today. And he was out there and he was saying that, he wants to do a better job of leading and stepping up as a wide receiver when Tyreek Hill is out. And I'm like, well, yeah, dude, that's kind of what everybody was hoping for the plan to be, is that you were going to come in here and that this was going to be an easy succession plan, that when Cheetah was done, this was going to be Jaylen Waddle's show. That was the plan. And I was just, I was glad that he at least said it, but I am hopeful that speeds the hell up for Jaylen Waddle. Because, when he says that, I need to, he said, I especially think when 10 is out, I've got to set the standard and lead. Yeah, you do, dude. And this is about that time, Penguin. It's time to get that doing. But he says they think they can learn a lot with these joint practices, and he thinks that the team is got a good group that's gonna respond. They're gonna learn from the joint practices, and it's gonna make them stronger. So I think it's proper urgency, but proper perspective from Waddle. So yeah, you hope it's a better day in the second joint practice. But man, these Dolphins are not making it easy on any fan's anxiety about this year. They have done very little to ease anything this summer.